Welcome to the Being Curious Show. I'm Brian Mariani, founder of No Shift Own.
And I'm Kelly Wagner, publisher of Edge Magazine. Our show is about curiously connecting teachers and seekers on a wide range of topics in a safe space. Few topics will be off limits, and we have some amazing guests to share with you.
Our intention is that our conversations will spark your own curiosity to create a life that lights you up and inspires you to be kind, thoughtful, open-minded to yourself and others.
We are on AM 950, Sundays at 2 p.m. and all podcast platforms. So, Brian, what are you curious about today?
Hello, beautiful ones. It's Kelly. Brian is tripping the wild fantastic as always. So today we're doing actually a couple shows. Some of the different formats that we're doing and playing with our beautiful show is having multiple guests in an hour in our time with you. And sometimes we go long form and short form. So today is going to be one of our fun little adventures with an amazing soul. Her story is going to be hard to capture in 22 minutes. And we're very, very blessed to have author, pioneer, and the godmother of women in recovery, Karen Casey. Karen, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. I'm just delighted to be here.
Oh, good. Well, hey, tell us a little bit about yourself. And by the way, just letting you know, because we do interview a bunch of authors and beautiful people like yourself. I do have it. I have the hard copy for everybody that's on Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live and all the beautiful things that we're doing live. I do have this fantastic book, and this is the most recent one from Karen. So Karen, please welcome to the show and tell the audience about yourself, please.
Oh, thank you. Well, I am a woman in recovery for 47 years. I celebrated 47 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, May 24th. And
congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it has been an amazing journey. That first AA meeting, I had no idea when I went that it was something that would captivate me like it did. I mean, I was a pretty high functioning alcoholic at the time. I was working on my doctorate at the University of Minnesota. It was evident to me that my first marriage was fraught with alcoholism. Both of us were certainly active alcoholics. But I really, I didn't really think of it as alcoholism. We just drank a lot, but I also was very productive. So I never saw that it got in my way until it became apparent that it was in my way emotionally. And our marriage ended after 12 years. And I jumped into one poor relationship after another. And finally, I was in a relationship with somebody who was trying to get sober. I was not helpful in that process, certainly, but he was trying to get sober. And his counselor said to me that I should go to Al-Anon. And I never heard of Al-Anon. And that was actually in 1974. And that was the turning point for me before I actually got sober. I went to Al-Anon in the fall of 1974, and I was just amazed at the comfort level that I felt, because that isn't how I had ever felt in a room of strangers, unless I was already under the influence. And so I knew there was something special. I didn't know what that something was. And I didn't stop drinking at that point. I mean, Al-Anon wasn't about me stopping drinking. I thought it was about me trying to help somebody else to stop drinking, actually.
Right.
And of course, that isn't really what Al-Anon is. Al-Anon doesn't teach you to change somebody else. It teaches you to change yourself.
So Karen, just to give a little bit of a moment, what is, just for our listenership, what is the difference between AA and Al-Anon?
Well, Al-Anon is for the families and friends of alcoholics. And it really tries to help them deal with their own codependency issues. Right. And, I was very aware, or became very aware, I should say, that I had been codependent probably all my life, meaning that I was always looking to others to make sure I was okay. Right. I was always trying to fit my life into somebody else's life. And sometimes that meant I would try to control them so that I would fit better, um, or take care of them so that they would want me to stay in their life. And of course, when my first marriage ended, it was pretty disheartening because he ended up leaving for somebody else, which was, and I mean, as I say, he was definitely an alcoholic, but nevertheless, I was devastated when he left,
Of
which
course
is
you
why
are.
then I kept choosing people similar to him.
Right.
And but then ultimately, I ended up in a situation, a couples communications with a counselor, except my partner at that point, it was a new partner, never showed up for any of the sessions. And she finally said, Karen, I think it's time for you just to tell us about yourself,
Mm.
since your friend John never shows up. Well, I began to talk about myself, not expecting to have her say anything but, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. She stopped me very quickly and said, Karen, I think that you have a problem with alcohol. I think you need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was dumbfounded. And,
You're
but
like,
I,
who, me?
yeah, me, here I
I
am
I get
working,
my work done and I do this and I live my
right.
life
And I
and
was
everything's
working on
fine.
my
Me?
doctorate. I'm teaching at the University of Minnesota. How can I possibly have a, and so then I went to that first AA meeting, and I walked in and I was absolutely blown away by this room full of people who were joyful, you know,
Mm.
who were, and they were about my age. At that point, I was 36. I am a month away from 84 now. And, but I looked at that room full of people, and the first thing I really noticed was that the room was full of good looking men. And I thought,
Ooh,
oh my God, oh my
what have I
God,
been
Karen.
missing?
Hey, I should have been here all along. There's way more good looking men here than I ever see sitting on the bar stools in all these bars on the West Bank where I am. So, I went to that first meeting, as I say, never expecting that, that my desire to drink would be gone. I was a heavy duty. I hit them hard. I was a Jack Daniels drinker, and I
Ooh.
went home that night, poured out that bottle of Jack Daniels, and the thought of taking a drink never crossed my mind again. Now, my
That is
journey in
so
recovery,
okay, yeah, keep going. That's what
my
I want to know.
my journey in recovery was bumpy at times. And that's not unusual for our journey to sometimes be bumpy. And the bumpiness of my journey was because I struggled to feel a real connection to my higher power.
Mm.
And AA and Al-Anon doesn't say you need to believe in God, absolutely. So I want anybody listening to know that they are not religious programs at all. But the suggestion is that you do find something outside of yourself to believe in. And
I
that was,
just kept seeing greater than us. Like it just
yeah,
whatever
greater
you
than
believe
yourself.
in, whatever your
Right,
faith is, just something
right.
something greater than just what's here.
That's right. And so, but I struggled with that. And somebody told me early on, well, you can kind of rely on my higher power until you find your own. And actually, that was kind of helpful.
Okay.
And but after about 18 months, Kelly, I was really at a desperate point. I had been sober all that time, but I was really struggling, and I just thought, this is not worth it. I didn't think about drinking, but I thought about ending my life. And so that happened very early in my journey, that I was prepared to end my life. And it didn't seem like a big deal at all, Kelly. And I had grown up as a chronically depressed kid. I didn't know that, I didn't understand that that's what was going on. But as a matter of fact, that night, I rolled up all the towels. I lived in a one bedroom apartment cost $100 a month for that apartment. It was right by Loring Park. And I rolled up the towels with the plan of tucking them around the windows and then turn on the gas. And there was a knock at the door. And I was not expecting anybody. And I was just shocked that somebody was knocking at my door. And I went over to the door and just kind of quietly said, "Who's there?" And this woman's voice said, "Well, it's Pat, and we have an appointment." And it's like, "What? An appointment?" And so I opened the door just a crack to see if it was anybody I knew. And I'd never seen her before. And she was very tall, very attractive, red-haired woman. And she pulled out her daily planner. And sure enough, there was my name. And I said, "Well, what are we meeting about?" And she said, "I'm a financial planner. We're meeting to discuss your finances." And that was laughable. You know, I although I did teach at the university, I made very little money.
Right.
And as I said, I lived in a $100 a month apartment. I didn't have any big savings account. So it was shocking. But she kind of wormed her way in and walked into the kitchen and sat down. And she said, "Is there something wrong?" And I said, "Well, I'm really depressed." And she said, "You know, I'm really familiar with depression. I've struggled with it too. And so is my husband, and he's a recovering alcoholic," which was kind of a shock to me. And she said, "You know what I've come to believe, based on reading a book by Catherine Ponder, is that when we're in the midst of a really deep depression, we're really on the precipice of a whole new spiritual awakening." So she said, "What I want you to believe is that you're on one side of this abyss, and God is on the other side, reaching for you. And all you need to do is put out your hand,
Hmm.
and He'll take it." And she said, I know this to be true based on my own experiences. And honestly, she talked so gently and so softly. And after she shared that, she got up and walked toward the door. And she said, "You know, my business here is done." And she turned back and reached toward me and gave me a hug. And she said, "You're going to be just fine. I want you to know that God is here now, very present. All you have to do is reach toward Him." And she
Hmm.
disappeared. And I never saw her again. And I have come to believe that actually she was, and this may sound kind of hokey to some of the listeners, but I've come to believe that she was an angel on assignment. If she had not appeared at my door, I wouldn't be here, Kelly. I
No, no.
mean, I would have literally have ended it. And but then the rest of my life unfolded in ways that I couldn't have imagined. For instance, that book you held up just a moment ago, Each Day a New Beginning. I wrote that book. That book was originally written in 1982. This year it's celebrating its 40th anniversary. And I didn't sit down ever to write a book for other women. I started journaling because I was desperate to try to find some way to connect to that higher power.
It was your flow. I just see it
It
that it was like
was,
this beautiful flow and it's a
it
connection.
was,
Hmm.
it just came. I mean, I would sit and I didn't, I can't even describe it to anybody, but that's continued to be the way my writing is. You know, my most recent book, actually, Each Day a Renewed Beginning, that I wrote during the quarantine. Each Day a Renewed Beginning. I'll hold this up. I don't
Get
know
it
that they
up.
can see it.
Yeah, they
But
can. Here, there we go.
and anyway, Each Day a Renewed Beginning, Meditations for a Peaceful Journey, I wrote during the quarantine. And you know, and again, it was the same kind of thing. That was my 30th book. And every
Okay, wait
time,
a second. Hold on. Everybody, that was her 30th book. Okay, now you keep going.
Okay. And when I look back at my life, Kelly, it has amazed me so much, because none of this would I have thought for a plan for my life. I had no idea where my life was going. I grew up in Lafayette, Indiana, a scared little kid who always, as I said, always was looking to feel as though I fit in, which
Right.
was that codependency. And then alcohol began to change things for me. Alcohol made me feel comfortable. And then, of course, that first husband leaving, bless his heart,
Yes.
led me to all of those other bad relationships.
Yeah.
And that's what led me
Learnings.
ultimately to Al-Anon and then AA. And so I feel so firmly that everything in my life, the entire trajectory of my life, has been perfect.
It is.
And I think about that. I had to really think about that today, though, too, when I was trying to find your studio
Okay,
so I
everybody, I'm
could
gonna let
appear.
everyone know that Karen was supposed to be in studio, and bless her, she
Right.
got lost, or like divinely, you were supposed to do it from your
I
home,
guess,
and
I
we had
guess,
to punt a little bit to make things happen. But um, it's
yeah,
serendipity, right? And but
yeah,
then
it's
instead of
serendipity.
giving up, and instead of going and getting angry, you just dialed in, and we're like, we're
Yeah.
gonna just change everything up, and we're just gonna flow.
And yeah, and so I just look at that and it just makes me chuckle. It's like that higher power that I so resisted
Oh,
uh 47 years ago,
right.
uh I now know was has always been in charge. From the
Oh,
time I was that kid, when I didn't believe anything, and I didn't grow up in a family that stressed really a belief in anything.
mhm,
And I mean, it wasn't anti Christian, certainly, but we weren't raised to say grace before a meal. And so, I was just kind of floundering, my whole life until I got into the rooms of Al Anon and AA. And, after all these years, I still go to multiple meetings every week of Al Anon and AA, because that really is where my sustenance comes from. And
mm,
I believe completely that once we are clean and sober, we have an obligation to be there for others, to
right.
help show them the way. So, you know, I'm always disheartened when I meet somebody who says, "Oh, I don't go to AA anymore. I don't need AA," because I feel like people need us. They need to see us old timers. They need to see that recovery can last as long as we're alive.
Right.
And there are always those newcomers coming in, and they need us to be present. So, I feel like I've had just an incredible life, not one that I ever would have planned for myself, but there isn't anything about my life that I would change. I I've lived in, my husband and I spent, up until he got cancer, we spent winters in Florida for 32 years. And so last year and then this year, which was brutal, were the first two winters. And all those years we were back here in Minnesota.
Oh,
But
that
I
was your
look at
fault.
that. Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
kidding. I'm just
right,
kidding.
right. It's like, oh, wouldn't you know, here we are back and look at the winter we're having.
Oh
But
god.
everything, everything is,
It's your
everything is
flow.
as it should be.
It is as it should be. So, I know it sounds crazy, but we have like 2 minutes left, and I want to know not only again, how can people get your books, but and reach out to you, because you have a very powerful message, and I love that you have that sense of responsibility and community and mentorship to those that are wherever they are in the world. You're willing to meet people where they're at. But do you have any
That's
final thoughts and suggestions for people who are seeking to cultivate more peace, um,
well,
and
you know,
action
I,
in their life?
I think that the desire to be at peace. I think the reason that has called to me so much, Kelly, is that we live in such a tumultuous world these days.
Oh yeah.
And and it feels so often like there is so little we can do to make it better. But I believe that each of us has an opportunity every moment to show up peacefully and kindly in every encounter we have. And I think that every time we do that, we're not only changing the experience for that person we encounter, we're changing something for ourselves, and we're
Absolutely.
changing something for the entire universe. We, in every act we have, every act we make, we're either making a difference for the good, or we're adding to the stress and the trauma of this world we live in. And so I feel like every breath we take, we can be offering greater peace. There's a woman, I have been facilitating A Course in Miracles for 35 years. And A Course in Miracles is another spiritual pathway that I so believe in. And its focus is on being an expression of love wherever we go. And not let ourselves get pulled off that pathway. And all that really means is, how can I be a better representative of the God of my understanding in this next moment? Well, I can do it by being loving, regardless of what the encounter looks like. I can show up as a loving presence.
You guys,
And
Karen, thank you so much. I mean, you are like, and oh my gosh, we could speak for hours and hours and hours. I have to go to our next segment as I'm actually just watching our link just completely die. The cameras die and everything. This is crazy. The energy coming in. Karen Casey, she is an author. The 40th then we have that 40th anniversary of Each Day a New Beginning, Daily Meditations for Women is out now. Karen Casey is an author, and to find her, it is www.womens-spirituality.com. Karen, we're going to have you back again. We're going to have it with Brian. And thank you so much
thank,
for being here. And thank you so
oh,
much for the
thanks.
message.
And thanks for being understanding and patient with me.
My pleasure. It's all good.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. This is Kelly from the Being Curious Show. And guess what? We'll be back.
Okay.